You shipped YouTube comments on mobile devices. Comment engagements are up, but YouTube watch time is down. What do you do? Hey everyone, welcome back to another Exponent Product Management mock interview. My name's Kevin Wei, and on today's show, we have Cherrie. And before we get started, could you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Cherrie. I'm a former product manager at Google, and one of the products I worked on was at YouTube, as well as Google Maps. I'm super excited to be doing the mock interview.
Thanks, Cherrie. So today, let's do an analytical or execution type interview question. And the question I have for you today is, you shipped YouTube comments on mobile devices. Comment engagements are up, but YouTube watch time is down. What do you do?
Awesome. Okay, so just to clarify, I'm just going to repeat it back to help me. You ship YouTube comments on mobile devices, and comments engagement are up, but the YouTube watch time is down. And you want to hear kind of my process about handling this scenario. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Great. Well, I'll just kind of outline overall how I'd like to approach this. So I want to kind of clarify, some of the terms in our question and set up the parameters for our discussion. I'll list some high-level reasons that could be causing the problem, and try to gather context information, maybe ask you a few questions to understand more. And once we can start discarding issues that are out of scope, I'll establish a theory of probable cause, and then we can try to test this theory and fix the problem. Does that sound good?
Yep, that sounds good.
Sweet. So yeah, clarifying and establishing the situation a bit further. I want to be really explicit about the goals of this launch, right? We should never launch a product or feature blindly without any expectation of what's gonna happen, right? Launches don't go out into a black void and then woo, surprise, like the comments engagement went up and this happened. So in this particular scenario, before the launch of YouTube comments, I would have expected that me and my team have established some launch criteria as well as backstop metrics. I'll go ahead and take a quick stab at sort of approximating this to help frame our decision for what to do after its launch, because I don't think we can have a meaningful discussion about what happened after launch until we have success metrics. So is it okay if I use some numbers to illustrate what I mean by this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so let's assume, I'm just pulling a number here. Let's just assume that 50% of all YouTube watch time happens on mobile devices, right? And so the feature is YouTube comments on mobile. I'll assume that YouTube comments on desktop has already been launched. We know that desktop came first. And so now, yes, we want these comments on mobile. Super exciting. By launching comments on mobile, we would definitely expect that comments engagement to go up. If comments engagement at launch is at a similar level to what we saw on desktop, then just by launching, we should have essentially doubled comments engagement, right, by bringing it to mobile. So it's a given that comments engagement goes up. And let's say we set our success metric to be that comments engagement is at least 50% increased. At minimum, we have feature performance parity. On desktop, we have the setup where on YouTube, you have the currently playing video on the left, we have comments below it, and then a column of recommended videos to the right side. So the currently playing video, the comment section, and the next recommended videos can all be visible on the screen at the same time. Considering some implications of mobile here, real estate on phone is a lot less than desktop. So we won't be able to kind of so neatly fit all those 3 features on the screen at one time. In launching comments v0, let's say we made the decision to put the comment section on top of the recommended videos that would normally be below the video player. So previously, if it were just videos and more videos, we now have videos, comments, more videos, right? And therefore, it's a pretty logical assumption that watch time is going to be affected, or the more videos below will be less seen, right? If we're showing less of those recommendations, then the users will watch less. I think the real question here is how much are we okay with, right? There is some trade-off. In a perfect world, I think everything would go up and there's no downside at all, but user attention is a pretty limited resource. So if a user has 10 minutes to spend on YouTube, maybe they spend 7 minutes watching a video, their first video, and then they spend like 3 minutes watching a follow-up video from the recommendations. But if we're inserting comments, maybe you spent 7 minutes on the first video, and you spend 3 minutes browsing comments, and then we lose out on the extra 3 minutes of watch time that we might have gotten, right? Given those, we assume that there's going to be some drop in watch time. Maybe we set a backstop metric of we're okay with a 5% drop in YouTube watch time, right? I'm just saying 5% today. I mean, it could be we saw something similar when we launched comments on desktop, and we know that in the long term, rolling out comments is a better strategic move. We have some strategy that we're going to see it go up in the future. That's why we're okay with 5%. I think it's, it's reasonable that we assume that there will be a drop, but we want to set the backstop of 5%. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I don't think the exact number is important here. I'm kind of curious what you might do here. So let's assume, let's assume that the current ordering on mobile is video, comments, and then recommended videos. I think that's fair, and I'm curious where you might go from here. But I think everything you've laid out so far definitely makes sense.
Awesome. Yeah, this is just some quick back of the napkin sort of thinking. So we have some numbers to work with. I'm not doing anything crazy. It's like 5% and 50%, right? I want to get to the post-launch evaluation part, and I think that's where it's interesting. But the reason why I wanted to take the time to set this up is because it gives us a framework, right? Our launch criteria is that comment engagement is 50% increased and watch time does not drop more than 5%. So going back to the question, I shipped YouTube comments on mobile devices, comments engagement are up, but YouTube watch time is down. What do I do? Well, then that just depends entirely on the numbers, right? In one case, let's say comment engagement is 50% increased, watch time dropped 4%. But the comments engagement is good, it's what we want it to look like, then we launch, right? That's what we do. Yes, the watch time is down, but we made that decision beforehand, and that's how you make a clear decision. Like, you can't have something happen in the data and be like, well, I actually don't know about that, right? So I think if we establish good launch criteria, then less than 5% is okay. Yes, the watch time is down, but we're gonna launch. The second case could be comment engagement is 50% increased, right? But watch time dropped 10%. We don't launch there. We need to stop, we need to dive into the data, and we need to figure out where that extra drop is coming from. There are other cases too, like comment engagement only increased 10%, but watch time dropped 20% or something. We don't launch, right? You see what I'm getting at, but for today, like we'll focus on the comment engagement is like plus 50% increased, but watch time dropped over 5%, right? This is where we gets interesting. And my overarching goal here is to identify the problem causing this, let's say 10% drop, right? Propose and execute a fix so that the metrics get to within our launch criteria, and then we can safely roll out the feature. Cool. So before I start breaking it down, there's one more thing I wanted to clarify, which is this measure of engagement, right? I was kind of talking broadly about the 50%, but how would you kind of like to define comment engagement? Is it by the number of comments created, the number of replies to comments, the number of likes on a comment, time spent scrolling on comments, taps on a comments, all of the above? Just love to know if there's anything in particular you had in mind.
So let's say the team just has some aggregate score. So everything it encompasses everything that you've mentioned.
Sweet. Okay, cool. And can I also assume that we have some spam abuse detection in place? Because for a big company to roll out a open forum of text, I think it is a risk to not assume that we put some measure of abuse in place so that these are not just spam.
Yeah, you could assume that these are meaningful comments.
Okay, sweet. Right. At a very high level, the decline in watch time is due to one, users watching less minutes of YouTube videos, right? And we also know that users are creating, replying, liking, and sharing more comments on YouTube. So to start diagnosing the cause of these behaviors, I'll begin by asking the following questions to get some more context around the decline in relation to the launch of comments. So first of all, let's just kind of think about the time period, right? Is this decline in watch time a one-time event, or has it happened sort of progressively? Essentially, what does that graph look like, right, of YouTube watch time? If it's a one-time thing, then it's a possibility that a technology glitch caused this problem, such as a downtime in the services that support YouTube. This has happened before. Or is it a big drop of watch time on day one of the launch when everyone saw the new comments feature and just went absolutely crazy for it, but now it's recovering slowly? So maybe our 7-day rolling average looks a little shaky, but we know that it's going to go back up. I would definitely ask if there are any technical problems that coincided. 10% is a big drop. Check to make sure that the watch time looks healthy in the control group as well. If the decline in engagement is progressive and the cause is still there, then we continue diving deeper into data. Right. Another thing, just at a higher level to think about, is the region. Is the decline in YouTube watch time happening in an isolated region? If this is true, like the problem might be specific to a country, and it could be an issue with international, this word kills me, internationalization or localization, right? So YouTube comments, they show text strings in rows, but each language has different types of text. I'm just kind of ideating here on what could be the cause for some of these different countries having different results. For instance, Chinese characters, very compact, right? The same sentence could be one line in Chinese, but take up 5 lines in German, which is a super long language. Did that impact how long our comment section sort of expanded to, and therefore potentially affect the amount of scrolling that users have to do in one region to get to the recommended videos below, or somehow impact what they're seeing on their screens? So region is one thing we could consider. Another thing is thinking about platforms. Is the decline happening on a specific platform, such as iOS or Android? If so, I would definitely compare the drop of YouTube watch time engagement on each platform with engagement across all platforms, right? Does something about our new feature, the way that we built it, not work as well, considering unique UI patterns of different platforms? We know that people swipe on iOS versus they use a back button on Android. Do we properly accommodate for tap target sizes across different screens? Could users be accidentally tapping comments and therefore driving our engagement up when they actually want something else, right? So these are all things that I want to have logging for, have our engineers dive deeper into to answering these questions, right? And of course, thinking holistically, is this decline in engagement happening in other YouTube features besides watch time? So for instance, are YouTube searches down? Are users overall spending less time on YouTube? If so, we've definitely got a much bigger problem. It's not just YouTube watch time that's down. We've somehow affected the whole system, and we need to look at that as well. So I've just kind of laid that out. To be fair, it's probably not going to be the case that all of the above are happening simultaneous. That would be a pretty disastrous launch. So this series of questions for me kind of helps me fine tune where that problem is really coming from. And, I think in a real world setting, we do the due diligence and we'd get answers. I want to be exhaustive when it comes to listing, all these possible causes, because, then we can establish the theory of probable cause. Yeah, so to continue with more in-depth analysis, should we assume that, it's not like a regional problem, or it's not platform specific? Maybe it's just like a more progressive decline, and therefore, like, we want to dive deeper?
So you've mentioned a few interesting things about, you've looked into drastic versus steady declines, tech glitches, region, or platform, or anything wrong with the ecosystem on YouTube. Let's say that, yes, it seems like this is a steady decline. So I'm kind of curious where you might go from here.
Right, yeah. So we'll rule out, let's say we checked all the countries, looks like it's declining in all the countries. The situation is generally not due to some tech glitch, right? So yeah, then I want to continue diagnosing what could cause users to behave in the 2 ways I described, right? Which is, 1, they're creating, replying, liking more comments, so the aggregate score is going up, but 2, watching less video. So concerning the reduced watch time, the most important question for me regarding watch time specifically is, like, where is that reduction of watch time coming from? Is the 10% loss primarily coming from less engagement with the recommended videos that would have normally shown up above the comments, right? If so, then I think there's a bunch of like low-hanging fruit that we can try out, right? We can consider some treatments to reduce the size, show less comments, and more recommendations. If at launch, maybe we did 3 comments and then a expansion and then the recommended videos, we could try showing just 2 or just 1 comment to save space to push up the recommendations. This could be something we just run quickly to see if indeed we start to reduce the impact on watch time. Like, it doesn't have to be the final solution. I think these are things that we can test. If users were also like previously watching an average of 3 recommendations after their first video, what's that change? Has that changed? Are they like now watching 0 new videos after their first video? I mentioned earlier that users have limited time and attention. If now we're only showing 1 new recommendation above the fold, so above the point where the user needs to scroll down, and maybe that first video is like 15 minutes long, maybe, yeah, I wouldn't want to click on that after spending so much time playing with these new comments, right? So perhaps we can consider a treatment where we adjust the ranking for the new recommendations to be shorter videos up top so that we can kind of, make the barrier to clicking another video lower. So I think there's a lot of things we can play with here in the category of how do we make the portion of videos below the currently playing videos, so that all those recommendations, how can we make that more appealing? How can we up the engagement with them, because that we're seeing that there's a lot of reduction of watch time there, right? There's another thing I think that's worth bringing up, like, is it an education problem? Like, do users not know you can scroll down to see more recommendations? Like previously, they're used to seeing their recommendations right below the video, but we've put comments, and then maybe there's this assumption like, oh, it's just the comments and that's the end. So a potential solution here, I think, is like trying to add a tooltip or some educational banner of like, by the way, like we added comments, but you can still scroll down to see all the recommendations that you know and love, right? So I think that's for me, if we answer the question of like the reduction of watch time is coming entirely from users clicking less recommendations below the fold, like let's try a couple of these UI treatments, let's see how users respond, and to see if we can start to recover some of that 10% loss and get it closer to the 5% range, right? The other thing, if we go on a deeper level, is there a problem with the recommendation video pipeline, the type of video content being shown? Are recommendations being generated but not displayed on the screen? If this were the case, it could explain why users are not watching as much. I mean, I get that this is one of those cases where we probably see a drastic decline as opposed to a progressive decline. If we somehow wiped the recommendations from the screen entirely, then we'd probably see a cliff in terms of the engagement. So the probability of this being the cause is small. But yeah, I think, just keeping a very tight eye on what's happening, everything that's happening within the YouTube recommendations below the current video. We can think about whether there's been an increase in video reports or user dissatisfaction on recommended videos. Poor recommendations could cause users to leave the app and be a possible cause of this progressive decline in engagement. I definitely investigate this further, ask my engineering team to check whether there are any changes or signs that the algorithm is performing abnormally, or even, the result of a targeted attack where hackers try to drive up malicious content in the feed, right? We know that's happened where people will just do that, and all of a sudden you're seeing this kind of bad content being pushed to the top of your recommendations. So I think those are like, if we kind of pinpoint like, hey, we have this new UI where instead of seeing my module of recommended videos right below my current video, it's been pushed below her. Like there's a couple things I think we can try in terms of making that more prominent, making that first tap into the recommendations a little bit more appealing by having a shorter video, diving deeper to make sure that there's nothing wrong in the pipeline overall. And, I also want to, I think, do some due diligence. And even though we see overall that comments is up 50% and we have some aggregate score that is taking into account abuse, let's just make sure that this new increase in comments is primarily positive engagement, and that we can be sure that it is the users that would have been watching more video that are commenting, right? So we're making sure that it's a one-to-one. So those users that would have been tapping on more videos, they're the ones commenting, and it's not some mismatch here where we're assuming that that's the case when maybe it's not, right? So yeah, I mean, I know we're roughly at time, but to summarize my approach to kind of finding this lower watch time, and we can go deeper, is just, understanding that context, being sure that we can hone in on the real problem to solve and discard the things that are unrelated, and just continue to test each of these probable causes to identify the exact source. And if we do find that thing that helps us lift the decline to the right level, then I think we can safely launch the feature.
Thanks, Cherrie. And before we do end the mock, I do have one follow-up question. And you mentioned some interesting A/B tests, like reducing the size of the comments or changing the sort of videos that are recommended. How would you go about testing one of these experiments?
Yeah, so one example I brought up was like, let's say at launch we did 3 comments, right? I think a setup for an experiment like this is we just have multiple arms. you always have a control, and then you would have, an arm perhaps with 3 comments, and then an arm with 2 comments, and an arm with 1 comment. And we'd compare what the decline of watch time looks across all of those 4 arms that I just set up, right? So the variable that we're testing is the number of comments that we show. How does that impact decline on watch time? So we know that with our control, there should be no impact on watch time. And we know that with 3 comments, which was our initial launch, that caused a 10% decline. So does putting only 2 comments reduce that to maybe like 7%, and 1 comment is only 5%? That's kind of the measure that I would be checking. We want to keep that experiment pretty clean and only test one thing. Like another A/B could be like, we want to put a new tooltip that says, by the way, more recommendations below. We have a control, no tooltip, and a test arm where we put the tooltip and just kind of compare the engagement and the impact on the watch time.
And so how would you choose whether you want to choose which testing arm that performed better? So let's say like the 2 comments was a 5% decline, and then the 1 comment was a 2% decline. Which one would you choose?
We definitely choose the arm that's best. I mean, if we can, it also I think depends on the comments engagement. If comments engagement is the same for both, then let's choose the arm with less watch time decline, right? But I think like where it gets a bit trickier is like, let's say, oh, we only decreased watch time by 2%, but our comment engagement is now only 40%, right? Then we go back to what is our launch criteria, right? We established that way from the beginning, and that's what we need to launch this. I think the reason it's so important to have that always at the back of our minds is because therefore we don't see some data from a result, experiment result, and be like, well, this kind of seems bad or this kind of seems better. We always have what we decided at the beginning to guide us. And we know that 40% comment engagement is not what we're looking for. So even though it only impacted the watch time by 2%, I don't feel comfortable launching until we can get get us back to the 50%.
Great. Well, thanks, Cherrie, for the excellent mock interview. I honestly don't have much feedback to give. This was a very structured and thorough answer that you gave. I'm wondering if you might have any self-feedback that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting to consider the implications for specifically this question with abuse. I know that we kind of decided that we were just going to assume that we have some abuse system, but I do think it is important to consider in real product environments as well as in interviews, the fact that anytime you have users writing comments, anytime you have a free-form text box, that is a fire hose of abuse. And more often than not, I think growth can translate to actually just growth of abuse and growth of bad content. So I do think that when we think about things like, oh, engagement has gone up a ton, abuse is definitely a big thing that should be a part of the question for any media site. But yeah, I didn't obviously want to have our entire interview today be about abuse. So I think if one thing I would have loved to go in a little deeper is kind of my approach to handling that.
Got it. Cool. Well, thanks again for being on today's show. This was a great mock interview. And for the viewers, if you have a different approach on how you'd answer this, please leave a note in the comments. Would love to hear what you'd have to say. Otherwise, good luck with your upcoming PM interview.
Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons below to let us know that this video was valuable for you. And of course, check out hundreds more videos just like this at tryexponent.com. Thanks for watching, and good luck on your upcoming interview.